Mitchell has his head up, takes the feet.
Get that weak stuff out of here.
Get into some rapid fire questions, mostly just some true or false statements that I want to pass along to you guys. We'll start off here. True or false, the Cavaliers will have multiple All-Stars this season.
I'll start. I will say it's true, and that I will go even further and say that's just it's gonna be the backcourt. I think it's gonna be Darius and Donovan as the two. I don't know if I see the Evan Mobley All-Star leap, and I think it's the East center position is too deep, I think, for Jarrett to kind of contend for that, especially with how many mouths to feed this offense has too.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although I will say I question if Darius Garland would be the second one there, even though I think he's the easy pick. Just when you look at kind of like the FIBA team and just how the general national media seems to think about Garland, he seems very underrated, whereas Mobley did finish third in Defensive Player of the Year voting. So I could see him sneaking in there as the second All-Star for Cleveland. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell is as close to a lock as you can get, but I would pick them to have two All-Stars as well. Whether it's Garland or Mobley as the second one, I don't think that they're going to have so much regular season success and not get rewarded for it this time.
I'm gonna go 3. I think they end up. I have to be the contrarian here. I think the backcourt makes it in. Although the Eastern guard, the guards in the East, that's just a deep.
That's where it gets tough
right there. Yeah. So if it would not surprise me at all if Darius Garland again did make it in, as you guys point out, I think Donovan Mitchell is as close to a lock guarantee, whether it be a starter or a reserve, he's gonna make it in. I do think Evan Mobley takes enough of a leap offensively this season to have more eyeballs put upon him. So I'm going to go Darius, Donovan, Evan Mobley. Jared Allen has no chance.
Yeah, unfortunately, but go ahead,
I'm
Jackson.
going false just because there's a lot of people and the All-Star team isn't that big. So, there's going to be a lot of...
Who is the lone All-Star? Is it Donovan?
Yeah. It's just, I think it's tough for Darius Garland because all the other guards that would take his spot, you're looking at like Halliburton, Trae Young, someone he's going to be competing with, guys like Jimmy Butler, where you're just like, they're going to get those spots just kind of how their team's constructed and kind of the name recognition where they're going to have a lot more gaudy points. And I don't think like Darius Garland, if you were to guess his stat line, I think it's like a good season would be like 20 and 10. And I don't know if 20 and 10 is enough with what those guys are going to be putting up. And it's just the front court is really deep. I think Evan Mobley's the best chance, but it's also tough for somebody who again, a great season would be 20 and 10. It's tough for a 20 and 10 guy to be an all-star when you're, talking about guys like that. So I'm just going to say false.
Time to queue up the Max Strus All-Star campaign agenda. Yeah, it's going to be a fun season to watch.
Yeah, I think for Mobley, I mean, if Jaren Jackson was in the All-Star game, I feel like Mobley should be able to get in there, but we don't have to open up that whole conversation. We'll move along to our next question here. True or false, Isaac Okoro will fall out of the main rotation?
I'll start this one off and say true, just because he kind of fell out of the rotation in the playoffs. So, and I think JB's rotation is much smaller than it should be during the regular season. So I think there's going to be at least a couple of games where he's a healthy DNP. Even though I don't think Okoro fits great, I would like to see him continue to play just because I think they have a deep team.
Tony, I'm right up there with you in regards to the Isaac Okoro fan club. So I'm going to go false here. I understand the rationale, though, because you added shooters, and Isaac Okoro has not yet proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that he can be a respectable shooter. And to Jackson's point, could he get pulled come the postseason time? That's certainly a possibility, but I'm going to be a believer here and think that Isaac Okoro takes a semi jump this season. I don't think he has to immediately come into the season focusing strictly on becoming a knockdown shooter. I think the added spacing will help him as a cutter. I think it'll open up a lot more in regards to transition baskets for him. I don't think he falls out, but I definitely think that he's going to experience yet another minutes drop as he has the past couple of seasons.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I would say when I kind of ran through the rotation, it's the starting five with Max Strus in there. You have LeVert, Niang, and then really that eighth spot to me is going to be Okoro throughout most of the season. I'd be surprised if anyone really surpassed him consistently. There might be nights and maybe even in the playoffs he'll be taken out of it, but he was taken out of the rotation in last year's playoffs, and I didn't want him to be because I still think he had value on the defensive end. So that's just where I am on the Okoro fan club. But I do think, he doesn't even need to make a leap. I think just being with the second unit will help him a lot because he will no longer be playing next to two non-shooters. Hopefully it'll only be Mobley or Allen out there with him. You put Niang out there, you let him run alongside LeVert. Maybe the pace will be a little quicker. And so I think you're going to see Okoro get an opportunity to play to his strengths for really one of the first times in his career. The last 2 seasons, he has really been forced to be something that he's just not yet, which is that 3-and-D wing. He's made progress, but that's still not his game. It never was coming out of college. And so it's less of a leap and more of just adjusting his role to something that matches him. And I think being the 8th man in the rotation, we could see him thrive in a new way that maybe doesn't show up in the stat sheet, but you see on a night-to-night basis on the floor.
He basically is the victim of the roster too, because the roster is dictating the play style, and the Cavs offense for however many years has not been an offensive roster in the slightest. It's been a slog. The identity of the team is that we're going to grind our way to victory. It feels like his game has become so unnatural because that's what the offensive system is making him become.
I think it's also fair to say he's a victim of how skilled he is. Like, he's really athletic. He has good size. He's a great defender. He's a good finisher at the rim, and he is a better shooter than I think we give him credit for being. It's just that there's no such thing as like a space 2, like that's kind of the issue where it's like he's just not trusted to play 5-on-5 basketball. He's treated like the high schooler that's allowed to play in your pickup run just because you needed one more guy, but you're like, please don't, do anything too crazy. Like, that's how he's treated out there. And
I think there's just a combination of so many factors that have really worked against Okoro, whether it be his draft position, the role he's been given with the team, kind of the timeline speeding up on him. He's the only member of the core, I think, who has actually been negatively impacted by the Donovan Mitchell trade, just because it really sped up where he needs to be in that lineup. And all things considered, I genuinely am impressed that he still managed to find success in this starting lineup last year. I know there were still problems and limitations, but for all the things that have been asked of him for a guy who is still so young, he has done a reasonably good job at filling that role. And I do think now that he is going to hopefully be in a more comfortable bench role, we'll be able to see him focus more on his strengths again and have somewhat of a normal progression and development that we typically see from guys like that. Wrapping this up here, we'll ask one final question. True or false, the Cleveland Cavaliers will be title contenders next season?
Why you have to do that?
So, can I pass? Okay, so the frustrating thing is I think they have the skill to be a title contender. I think they have the talent. I think right now we're seeing a really evened out, watered down NBA where I think I don't think there's much separation between them and whoever you consider the best team in the East, especially if you're comparing them to Miami. But it's kind of like the intangibles. I feel like they're just losing around the margins in the sense of losing close games. ATOs never go good. I just feel like there's still just something that's not quite there. So I'm going to say false, but true. I don't think they're going to be title contenders, but if you told me that they were, I would believe it because they have the skill to be so.
I want to piggyback off Jackson because I actually agree for every single reason he just said. I feel like the Cavs just don't have the wherewithal where the roster, you just look at it. Don't look at the experience level of the players. Just look at the fit. Look how talented they are top to bottom. It's a yes that they should compete for the championship this year. But you also need to keep in mind that I don't think this team is going to go from losing to the Knicks 4-1 in the opening round to then just magically getting all the way to the finals and winning a so many series in a row. I think they haven't been battle tested enough where I expect them to know how to handle situations. I mean, just look at the Nuggets this year. How many years of heartbreak did they have to go through to get to the point that they got to? I don't think the Cavs have had those types of tests. I don't think that we're going to look back like a year from now and be like, man, that play-in loss to Brooklyn in that Knicks series really just taught them how to get through the tough times and win 4 series in a row. But I think they still have so many things to learn between now and a playoff series win. Not only that, but to get to a championship. Nevertheless, I think there's just too many roadblocks between now and then. But I think 2 years from now, this could easily, like, that's where their goal should be, to be in that like top 4 in the league type conversation.
I think all of that is fair to say. I mean, as much as I consider myself a positive, optimistic person, I think we're just not at that point yet, as much as it pains me to say that. Like, I think this past season, if you were to ask me if we would have won at least one playoff series, I would have said yes, although that did not happen. Heading into this next season, as Corey said, there's absolutely no way you go from getting your ass kicked and being ousted in 5 games to going to immediate championship contention. So no, I don't think the additions that we've made can justifiably sway public opinion in that regard.
Yeah, I'll agree with everyone here. I think if you ask the Cavs from their perspective, they should be thinking we're competing for a title this year. We're going as far as we can. But from a realistic standpoint, every other team that I would consider like an actual contender, Denver, Milwaukee, Boston, like all these teams have been there before. They've been tested. They've been through years and years of adversity. Even before they got to that stage, they were going through it. And the Cavs are still just so early in that process. I think the journey to becoming a champion in the NBA is such a long one compared to a lot of other sports where you really need to be tested and go through these stages that the Cavs are going through right now. So it would surprise me if they made that jump so quickly. I still think they should be playing with that expectations on themselves that they need to go as far as they can. And I wouldn't be like completely surprised if they made it to the finals just because the NBA is a little more watered down than it has been in recent years. I wouldn't pick them to get past those top teams. I just want them to be competitive against those teams is really all it comes down to.
So
all I'm hearing is the addition of former NBA champion Tristan Thompson does not make the Cavs title contenders this season.
Maybe.
You know who would, though? Larry Nance. And Jackson's the first one to agree with that.
We're cutting that, right?
Torian Prince.
Yes.
Great one.
Alec Burks.
Yes.
Let's just keep going.